Hi guys, welcome to Science in 5. In this video we're dealing with grade 12 physics skills, all the skills that you need to pass your grade 12 physics paper. This is. The first thing we just need to do is to go through a simple breakdown of the topics. This is one way of breaking down the topics. I know there's another way of doing it, but this is the basic way that I think would be useful. When you're getting close to exam time, it's always useful to condense the information as much as possible. So you've got three sections of work: the mechanics section, the electricity and magnetism, and the wave section. You'll agree with me that these two sections are the biggest sections in your paper: the mechanics section and the electricity and magnetism. If you want to get a good grade in a physics paper, make sure your mechanics and electricity and magnetism sections are up to par. I'm not saying the waves is not important, but in terms of quantity. Okay, so under the mechanics section, you can also break it down into probably, 6 sections. Okay, the first one is to do with adding vectors. So, section number 1 is to do with adding of vectors. Adding in one dimension, adding in 2 dimension. Do you understand this concept that a vector has got scale, a magnitude, and a direction? The other skill, I call these guys the big 4, and it's to do with motion, the equations of motion, the famous equations of motion. It's an important skill that you need to have in your skill set. Can you deal with the big 4 equations of motion? How do you use the big 4 equations of motion? And when do you use them? What is the approach? What if the question does that? It's a skill. If you have this skill, sharp. Now, if you know about the big 4 equations of motion, you know how to add vectors, it means you're now ready for Newton's laws and forces. So Newton's laws and forces. There are various forces that you need to be able to calculate as well. How do you calculate the normal force? It's a very important force. How do you calculate frictional force? How do you calculate the weight? What are the approaches? Very important skill. And this skill is based on this knowledge of adding vectors. The application of Newton's laws based on adding of vectors, and the big 4 equations of motion fit perfectly into the picture. Another skill that you probably need to have in your skill set is to do with momentum and impulse. Okay? So, momentum and impulse, Newton's law in terms of momentum. What is impulse? What is collision time? What is the law of conservation of momentum? Some of the skills you need to know under momentum and impulse. Then the other section is to do with work, energy, and power. It's very interesting how at grade 12 level some learners confuse a force and work done. Whenever they're doing a calculation, they always say the force and work are the same. They're not the same. They're linked, but definitely not the same. Okay, force and work are not the same quantities. All right. Force, it's a vector, the push or pull, measured in newtons. Work, scalar, measured in joules. We'll get to that later on now. And when you talk about the skills, that's how you work out, how to have skills about work, energy, and power. Especially when it comes to energy, how to calculate the gravitational potential energy. 3 important ways of doing it. We'll talk about that as well. Then the last skill that you might need to know is just to do about the gravitational field. There is Newton's law of universal gravitation in the picture. Under electricity and magnetism, we have Ohm's law and resistor networks. So when resistors are combined, how do you reduce them into a single resistor and all that? Then you can also talk of internal resistance and power in circuits. How to calculate the electrical power leads you to electrical energy as well. Then you've got the electric field. So another electric field, you find Coulomb's law, the concept of how to calculate electric field, charges and all that. All right? Then the last concept that we talk about is to do with electric machines and AC current. Okay. Electric machines and alternating current. Faraday's law. Normally in an exam you must be able to see you doing this thing, trying to do this. It's all under this part of electric machines and alternating current. Wave section, you have Doppler effect. If you're doing government paper, you need to know about the Doppler effect. If you're doing IEB, you don't need to know about the Doppler effect. Photoelectric effect, very simple section, depending on how you approach it. Then emission and absorption spectrum. If you're in IEB again, there's a slight difference because you need to do a few calculations. Skill 1, every grade 12 learner should be able to do. After having all these topics like this, can you assess yourself? Where is the missing link? Where are you struggling the most? If you're struggling with a particular section, perhaps you need to focus more on that section. When you're revising, don't just go at it one time. The important skill that you need to do at this level is to be able to assess yourself, know exactly where you stand. Empower yourself. When I look at all these sections, let's say I'm a grade 12 learner, I'll be like, hey, in the exam I did not know about internal resistance and power. Oof, the Doppler effect, momentum. Whatever the section is, that is the section that you need to focus on the most first. Okay, it's a very important skill, being able to assess yourself, being able to know exactly where is the missing link and then start with those sections. The whole purpose of this video, like we said, is to develop those skills that are essential for you to pass a grade 12 physics paper. So, at most, we're talking at the minimum, at least we're talking about minimum of 13 skills, but you discover that as you go through, there are probably about 20 or 22 skills that we're gonna talk about. 22 skills that are important to help you pass the grade 12 physics paper. Stay tuned to this channel. Shandices will be happening. If you have not yet subscribed, I don't know what you're waiting for, because Shandices are happening right here, like as I'm telling you, like Shandices are happening. So subscribe, stay tuned, hit the notification bell, and let's continue with the grade 12 physics skill. Coming up next, we're going to talk about how to add vectors. How to add vectors. So be ready for that one. Last time. Shandices. That sounded a bit violent, but that's it. Shandices.